When humans first moved into the Americas around 16,000 or 13,000 BC, they would soon discover a land known as Canada. This was a vast, largely uninhabitable region, yet some people tried to inhabit it. Pre-colonial Canada was made up of many diverse peoples, beliefs, and tribes. Then some Scandinavian people, probably drunk out of their minds, came here and founded a settlement. Then they all died. Nobody knows what happened. There's at least a couple of theories. So Native Americans lived in that land for centuries until all of a sudden an English explorer came in saying, "Hey, I own you all now." Then he left. Then Spain said, "I own that all now." They didn't even come over, they just sat comfortably from their throne with no idea of how colonization actually works. Then a Portuguese explorer said, "Hey, I own you all now." Again, not knowing how the idea of colonization actually works. Finally, a French explorer named Jacques Cartier came in with a brain larger than a walnut, claimed the land, and, being a mathematical genius, finally attempted to settle it. So he planted the cross, founded a settlement, and named it Canada, literally meaning settlement in the native Iroquois language. A true creative genius. After initial setbacks, the French managed to build a few permanent cities, notably Quebec in 1608. English colonies also expanded around the east coast of America and the Hudson Bay. Whilst this land in North America did not lead to trade routes with China as many Europeans had hoped for, the beaver fur trade became large and profitable as beaver became the material for many types of European clothing. Settlers and natives often cooperated to trap beavers. The English and French, however, were unable to find any source of friendship. The expanding Iroquois tribe came into conflict with many other peoples in the region, who mostly sided with the French. The resulting beaver wars saw France occupy English colonies and Iroquois villages in the Hudson Bay area, but were overall indecisive. The Treaty of Utrecht in 1703 saw France cede Nova Scotia and Newfoundland to England. The final blow came during the 7 Years' War. By then, the English had outnumbered the French heavily due to a lack of settlers coming to French North America. Thousands of soldiers fought on both sides, but when the English took Quebec and Montreal, the French had already lost, being unable to take back these key points. Ultimately, all French colonies in North America were given to England. The American 13 colonies, unhappy with British taxes, waged a war of independence. Canada was invaded, but they gave the Americans a humiliating defeat. The British, however, were trying a new, brilliant strategy called losing wars. Somehow, it did not work, and the American colonies gained independence. Many loyalists in America moved to Canada. Soon, Great Britain and the US would go to war once again in the War of 1812. Though technically a stalemate, British Canada did manage to recolor the White House by using flames. In 1834, Britain and by extension Canada abolished slavery. In 1837, the Canadians began to desire greater freedom from Britain, and this culminated in an outright rebellion. The rebellion was quickly suppressed, but it did result in greater autonomy for Canada. In 1846, a disputed border with America on the Oregon Territory was solved. The growing lumber industry and Klondike gold rush would be an incentive for large immigration to Canada. In 1864, the Quebec Conference united British North American colonies into a federation, and in 1867, Canada became a self-governing dominion of the British Empire, with the capital being located in Ottawa. Several factors led to this decision, such as British-Canadian nationalism and Britain wanting Canada to defend itself. The new government would expand more into the center and western parts of the country. The local Métis people, worried about their rights being violated, rose up in rebellion. Though the revolt was defeated militarily, the rebels won an important political victory and more rights. The leader of the rebels, Louis Riel, led yet another revolt to be yet again unsuccessful, and this time executed. These revolts caused somewhat of a rift between the English, French, and native populations. Around this time, the Canadian Pacific Railway was completed, connecting the two sides of Canada. Immigration and a stable economy would lead to population growth. Meanwhile, on the global stage, Germany was just created. About everyone agreed that they were an evil spawn of Satan, so the world had a war. Britain, France, and Russia fought against Germany and Austria, with others joining along the way. Britain and Canada became slightly closer whilst getting blasted with bullets and mustard gas, a wonderful environment for friendship. Of the 424,000 Canadians who fought, 59,000 would ultimately die in the unforgiving trenches, and desires for Canada having an independent foreign policy rose despite winning the war. During this time, women were granted more political rights, including the ability to vote. Canada was hit especially hard by the Great Depression, with GDP plummeting and unemployment skyrocketing. Canada was finally freed of British control in 1931 with the passing of the Statute of Westminster Act, recognizing them as an equal with the United Kingdom, and from here on, Canada became closer with the United States. On September 10th, 1939, Canada declared war on Nazi Germany after they invaded Poland, 7 days after Britain to symbolically show independence. The Canadian Royal Air Force became a point of interest in the war effort. Canadian soldiers participated in the Battle of the Atlantic, defense of Hong Kong, Dieppe Raid, invasion of Italy, and Normandy landings. During these operations and others, 45,000 Canadians died and 55,000 were wounded. Many people of Japanese descent were put in internment, despite reports that these people posed no threat. Canada and the US were brought much closer together by the war. Since the Second World War, Canada has not been involved in many major conflicts, and neither has much of the world in general. In 1949, Newfoundland became the last province of Canada. The modern flag, among other options, was finally adopted in 1965, though I do like this one portraying Canadians as three-headed dragons. In 1982, Canada became free to write its own constitution, and the remaining aspects of the British Parliament's influence were removed. Today, Canada enjoys a strong economy with a large oil industry in Alberta. The population of Canada is about equal to that of Poland, California, and the population of Canada. So now that I summarized the history of Canada as a country, here's a couple facts about our provinces. Ontario is by far the largest Canadian province in population, and really the only one that matters. Its capital and most populated cities are both Toronto, which is also the nation's most populated city. It also contains Ottawa, the nation's capital. 3 geographical areas make up the province: the Canadian Shield, Hudson Bay Lowlands, and the South. Both the Canadian Shield and Hudson Bay Lowlands are sparsely populated, leaving the South with most cities. Ontario has been the main destination for migrants from Europe, especially after the World Wars. Though a majority English province, French minorities can be found in the eastern and southern areas. Transportation links and resources mean that manufacturing has a large influence on the economy. Agriculture also has presence, mainly in the southern regions. Ontario has a diverse political spectrum, and the 3 main parties are the New Democrats, Liberals, and Progressive Conservatives. Quebec is the second largest province in Canada, and a unique one at that. Its capital is in Quebec City, and most populated city is in Montreal, with most people living near the St. Lawrence River. The northern section of the province is dominated by the Canadian Shield, whilst the southern areas contain the St. Lawrence lowland and the Appalachian Mountains. It enjoys, well, probably not enjoys, a majority French-speaking population, making it different from the rest of Canada. This has led to ideas of Quebecois sovereignty and nationalism. In 1980 and 1995, referendums were held debating independence, with neither passing, but in 1995 the vote was decided by a close margin of 1%. Independence, though less popular, is still an issue of debate. In 2006, Canada recognized Quebec as a sort of nation within a nation, though this is likely only a symbolic gesture. Quebec has an economy larger than most provinces, with a significant focus on aerospace and informational technology, as well as agriculture and tourism. The Liberal Party was unseated in the 2018 election because of a major victory for the Coalition Avenir's Quebec. British Columbia is the 3rd largest Canadian province, with a capital in Victoria and the largest city in Vancouver. Along its western side lies the Pacific Ocean, and both the coastal and Rocky Mountain ranges can be found here. The province also has a large ethnically Chinese population. Among its largest industries are real estate, manufacturing, and construction. The main political forces are the Liberal and New Democratic parties. Alberta is the 4th largest Canadian province, with its largest city in Calgary and its capital in Edmonton. Being one of Canada's prairie provinces, it enjoys a share of the Great Plains of North America. Because of this, the southern portions are treeless, whilst the northern portions and areas near the Rocky Mountains have many forests. The oil industry is a leading part of the economy. For a while, Alberta enjoyed one of the strongest economies in Canada. However, the oil industry recently went into a recession, a crisis from which the province is still recovering. Agriculture also makes up a large portion of the economy. Alberta tends to lean more conservative than other provinces, with the Progressive Conservatives being the dominant political entity for years. In 2015, the New Democrats won the election, signifying a possible swing to the left. Today, Alberta is governed by the United Conservative Party. Manitoba is the 5th most populated Canadian province, with its capital and largest city in Winnipeg. Arctic areas in the Hudson Bay coastline make up the northern geography. Lake Winnipeg can also be found in the south. Many of its industries involve natural resources, with the largest sections being oil and agriculture. The Progressive Conservatives make up the large majority of Manitoba's Legislative Assembly, with the New Democrats having a smaller share. Saskatchewan is the 6th most populated Canadian province, with its capital at Regina and its largest city at Saskatoon. From here on out, Canadian provinces become very sparsely populated, so I'll go into slightly less depth. Saskatchewan is another prairie province, so it contains prairies and boreal forests. About 10% of the state is a body of water. The leading industries are agriculture, mining, and oil. Nova Scotia is the 7th most populated province and one of Canada's maritime provinces. Its capital and largest cities are both Halifax. Nova Scotia can be divided into 2 areas: the mainland, which is a peninsula jutting out from New Brunswick, and Cape Breton Island, which is also a peninsula, but if you look at it hard enough, you can justify it being an island. The economy of Nova Scotia partially lags behind most of Canada due to declines in the fishing, coal mining, and foresting industries. New Brunswick is the 8th most populated province in Canada, with its capital in Fredericton and its largest city in Moncton. New Brunswick is heavily forested, with a fairly harsh climate. New Brunswick is a rather diverse province, being the only bilingual one in Canada. 1/3 speak French, 1/3 speak English, and 1/3 are bilingual. It has an overall poor but balanced economy, with many sectors. Newfoundland and Labrador is the 9th most populated province in Canada, with its capital and largest city in St. John's. The province is divided in two, the island of Newfoundland and mainland Labrador. 92% of the population lives in Newfoundland. For years, the province had a weak economy, but that has been turned around due to a boom in the energy and resource sectors. It's an island, named after a dead, bald English guy. It's pretty simple. They're north, they're western, they're territories, so what did we name them? Yukon is somewhat interesting. It has the highest peak in Canada as well as the Yukon River. Other than that, it's cold, it has gold, and it's probably full of mold. Just some big islands and a stupid name. Wait, this isn't a province, it's the 47th Oblast of Russia. So after all this history, what did Canada really accomplish? Well, they have a place named PP Island. Isn't that hilarious? They're known for their maple syrup. If you don't like maple syrup, well then they'll probably say sorry for it, for absolutely no reason, unless you are, of course, a Native American. Hockey. They like hockey, and haven't won a championship for 27 years. Canada's really boring, except for the weed, and the seal clubbing.